Hi, my name is Corey, and this is the first ever YouTube video I have ever done in my life. I have never used this microphone before, so I really hope it works. Anyway, if you're here, you probably know what Supernatural is already, so I'm not going to bother explaining it. As a child, Dean was forced into this sort of protector parental role for his younger brother Sam, due to the fact that their father was hunting monsters, and even when he was there, he wasn't the most affectionate or friendly man. Actually, I feel like that's too polite. He was an abusive bastard. Not a good man. I do not like him. You shouldn't ditch your kids in a motel when they are children. It's implied in this one episode that he was a mean drunk, which usually means physical abuse when someone is drunk, obviously. There's also just a few offhanded comments and mentions of John kicking Dean out during arguments, which Dean is like, oh yeah, it's fine, he was just in doing that, which, no, it was not. Your parents should be able to hold a discussion with you, and even when you piss them off, they shouldn't kick you out. That's basically the point I'm getting at. So within abusive families, there are often roles that the children in that situation fill, just to try and keep the family running on a surface level. These are kind of just guidelines. They're archetypes, they're not rigid or fixed. They can change over time as other things happen and the people in the family grow and develop their own lives and personalities. The one you need to know for Dean at the moment is the caretaker. Caretaker is exactly what it sounds like. A child who takes the role of parenting their younger siblings. They make up for the emotional, physical neglect and abuse that parents and are often kind of forced into this role. A lot of the time it's older siblings and the like. They sort of become a second parent. And on the surface, this keeps the family running. But this will fuck the kid up, trust me. Anyway, but it's not a good long-term solution. It's a lot of trauma. These kids tend to feel like very isolated and alone, having to put up this strong front in front of for like everyone around them, even their own parents, who are the people who are meant to protect them. Also, while John is just like fucking off hunting monsters, he dumps these two literal children in motels during the 80s and 90s. If you didn't know, you should not dump your kids in random motels surrounded by strangers. Like, that is just, even just on a surface level, that is such a terrible idea. Okay, let's just stop. Anyway, because Dean was put in this position at such a young age, he didn't really get a childhood. He wasn't afforded the opportunity to be a child because there wasn't an adult there for him, at least not one around long enough to stop this neglect and instead take up that parental role. He also ends up just constantly seeking his father's approval and being the perfect son by following his father without question and almost deifying him at some points, especially after he dies, sort of turning John into this godlike figure that Dean has to follow, which will become relevant to actual God later. And this leads to some wild shit. Just, this constantly puts Dean in dangerous situations and even being used as bait by like Meg and shit for his dad, because they know that they can get the Winchesters, and if they do, they will get his fucking dad too, and he won't actually care about them. Due to not being able to act like a child, Dean is shown to be very excitable when it comes to things that are commonly considered childish or things that were sort of staples in his childhood. Like, there's this one episode, I can't remember which one it was. There's this slinky. If you don't know what a slinky is, I'll put a photo of it somewhere here. He's just like very excitable about these sort of things and like Scooby-Doo and shit. I think the reason why he enjoys these things is because it allows him to experience this idea of childhood that he never had within the space he feels safe and with people he feels safe with. Like, during his childhood, Dean eventually just learns how to push down his own thoughts and feelings and doubts in order to protect his brother and be this perfect soldier for John. John also really drills into Dean's head that family is more important than anything else, and you must be loyal no matter what. Emphasis on no matter what. Is to John, being loyal is staying with family even when they become abusive and harmful to your own well-being, which I would like to mention is a very common tactic abusers, especially abusive parents, use to trap victims. If you tell a child from a young age that you must stay with family under any circumstances in spite of abusive behaviour, they will adhere to these rules potentially for the rest of their lives, therefore trapping them in a cycle of abuse that the original perpetrator might not even be perpetrating anymore. You've just fucked your kid up for life. John constantly abandoning Dean alongside losing his mother at such a young age in such a traumatic way, you know, the whole getting pinned to the ceiling and being set on fire. Witnessing that at the age of like 5 causes him to develop the worst abandonment issues I've ever seen in my fucking life. And that will become extremely prevalent. The way this sort of manifests for him, not letting people get too close, and when they get too close, push them away, because they won't hurt as much when they finally leave you. That's basically the sort of approach he's got going on here. Unfortunately, definitely during the beginning seasons, he sort of projects this onto Sam. Whole, like, follow John with blind faith. Spite of Sam clearly saying, no, I don't want to. And also with Sam, like, this whole thing happened where he had a massive fight with John because he wanted to go have a normal life instead of killing monsters for a living and never actually getting to have any relationships outside of that. And eventually he kind of just leaves and goes off to Stanford and doesn't talk to his family for a while. Dean is not happy with this. He very much is shown to disagree with this decision and believes that this was Sam somehow leaving him and being disloyal to the family, which obviously is in contest with a lot of the beliefs that John has sort of, how do I say it, indoctrinated him with. I think that Dean is doing something that a lot of people in abusive households do, which is abiding by the rules no matter what, so they don't get hurt. He excuses John's behaviour, saying that John did the best he could and wasn't that bad, especially when encountering other dysfunctional families where the abuse was more of the typical kind, like physical abuse. I would like to mention that this show was made in the 2000s and people didn't have as good understanding of abuse as they do now. Back then, which now I say that, I realise 2005 was only about 20 years ago, and I'm making it sound like it was decades ago. Still, most people only saw abuse as punching and hitting, which obviously it's more complicated and nuanced than that. I think Dean does this because if he accepts that John abused him, he has to examine all of these latent emotions and accept that John was a bad person. In the beginning of the series, he obviously still doesn't feel safe enough to admit these things and look at himself and the trauma he sustained from having his, well, it wasn't really a childhood, but yeah, from his childhood. It goes back to Dean pushing down his feelings, which therefore builds up and these emotions become more extreme as they are ignored. It's terrifying for Dean to ask for help, so he leaves the wound open, still bleeding for the next 20 odd years. Anyway, throughout the series, Dean slowly begins to realise that Sam wasn't disloyal or leaving him, he was simply trying to live a life he wanted to, and that John would have never allowed this, because John wanted complete control over his children. John never saw his children as their own people, their own beings with thoughts and feelings. He saw them as an extension of himself and therefore a reflection of himself. So he wants his kids to be exactly like him. Reminds me of someone I know. Dean follows this to a point, and then he begins to realise that he doesn't have to, and that he is his own person. One of the first, like, major examples of Dean going up against John is in season 1, episode 20, Dead Man's Blood. Sam and John just have this big fucking blowout argument, and Sam correctly calls John out on his bullshit. John kind of threatens him. It's weird. I don't like it. And during this whole thing, Dean goes to stand in front of Sam and is like, back the fuck off. Like, stop. And it's quite obvious that Dean is willing to, like, at this point, fight John if that's required. And we haven't really seen this before. All we've really seen father is defend him against everything. really. And even just through this one scene, you can see Dean rebelling against his father in a way that we haven't really seen on screen before. Dean often berates Sam for not following their dad, but in this scene, I feel like desire to protect his brother that, by the way, John instilled on him on an early age, so he kind of shot himself in his foot there, like overrid the desire to be this perfect son. Oh boy. It really shows that Dean is not completely loyal to his father. In situations such as these, he knows his father is in the wrong, so he acknowledges this and stands up to him. Also, we are at the end of season 1 now. John gets possessed, and the reason Dean figures this out, wait for it, because John tells him he is proud of him. Just let that sink in for a moment. This still blows my mind, how a demon can be better to you than your own father. Girl, you live like this. John's abusive parenting is put on full display for all to see. He just sucks. I hate John. And I'm glad he's dead. Also, we're getting on to the part where he dies. So when John dies, obviously affects Dean on like a very, very deep level, to the point where he reverts back to this sort of soldier persona that John created. He believes that being a good son is following without question, and that he is somehow honouring his father's memory by doing so. He keeps spouting the usual rhetoric that it's fair, how he did his best, that no one could have done better. Which is an absolute fucking lie, by the way, because we have Bobby, who not only had to watch his wife die, but had to kill her himself because she was possessed by a demon. Bobby didn't turn into an abusive piece of shit motivated solely by revenge. He dealt with his fucking grief and helped other hunters, and did not go on an insane revenge mission where he put fucking kids in danger. Okay, side tangent. Basically, due to the grief he was experiencing, Dean has done all that slight progress and gone right back to being what his dead father wanted. In early season 2, he also confesses that he is effectively tired of this life, which just means living. Context: Sam is infected with a demonic disease, and it's heavily implied that once Dean kills Sam, he'll kill himself as well. Because codependency and generally just being fucking tired. Feeling like death is the only way to escape. Put in this protector role his whole life, which copy-paste everything I said about the protector role here. He's been put in this role his whole life, and therefore it's what he believes gives him value. So if Sam dies, Dean believes that he himself has subsequently lost all value, so he should die if he gives no perceived value. This is compounded by the fact that Dean prior to this was probably tired and felt like he would die a hunter, and that is the only feasible way to get out. During this time, he's also hiding like his first big secret from Sam, which is John telling him that if Sam's demonic powers, capital P, get too far, he has to kill him. John Winchester. John Winchester, the father of Sam and Dean Winchester, asked Dean to kill Sam. Spoiler alert, Dean doesn't, even when he probably should have. Anyway, Sam brutally kills a fellow hunter. I can't remember why. I think it was because he was possessed by a demon, right? And Dean doesn't kill him. It turns out he was possessed. Sorry, I'm reading my script and I've forgotten what happened. This is also another example of a big defiance of John's direct orders, even after Sam is informed of this and tells Dean to kill him. Also at this point, Dean seems to start quietly realising that John was kind of a shit father, though he isn't nearly as far along as Sam is in his journey to realising this, because Sam sort of just has accepted this and is waiting for Dean to do so. So, Dean did something that probably had John rolling in his fucking grave, and that's progress. Once again, Dean's instinct to protect Sam overrides his dead father's orders, even when these orders go just beyond their family and into the potential apocalypse. Dean is willing to let Sam destroy the world if that means that Sam is still alive, which is an aspect of his trauma. Killing Sam is a failure to Dean's protective role, and he simply refuses to allow this. Unfortunately, Sam is killed at one point, he has his spinal cord severed, which will kill you. Basically like an internal decapitation. And then Dean sells his soul to a demon in order to get Sam back, because of course he fucking does. Now, time to introduce a new aspect of Dean's bullshit. Self-sacrificing. This is going to be very, very prevalent. Dean is a very self-sacrificial person, especially when it comes to the people he cares about. Like I said, protector role, whole thing. He has been taught that he has to do anything for his family, even if that means he sells his soul to hell and only has 1 year to live. He's so reckless to the point where it's almost suicidal, and it's really weird because he seemingly flips between, I'm not gonna take the fucking apocalypse lying down, and I want to die. And I think it's because even in the worst of times, he can still see that just tiny glimmer of hope at the end of a very, very dark and a very, very long tunnel. I think that Dean kind of always believes that there is somehow a better way. But sometimes it's too much. It's too much, and I don't blame him. Dean sacrifices himself a lot because he was taught to put other people above his own needs, to his own detriment at the age of 4. I think he was 4 when Mary died, at least. Dean does, in fact, end up in hell. For 40 fucking years. Technically it's 4 months on Earth, but time in hell is different. The demons can make it as long or as short as they want it to be. Obviously, this fucks Dean up really badly because it is endless torture, not exclusively restricted to a physical form. It's implied that in both heaven and hell, the metaphysical forms of souls can be tortured. And in heaven, it's even implied that the true forms of, say, an angel can be damaged or tortured, which is fucking terrifying. So, down in hell, Dean was tortured for 30 years and then was the torturer for 10 years. A demon named Alistair basically managed to break him and stop torturing him in exchange for him to torture others. This breaks the first seal. There are 66 seals that need to be broken, and over 600 potential seals. The first one is breaking a righteous man down in hell. Dean is the righteous man due to being Michael, an archangel, one of the 4 or 5 vessel and part of this whack-ass ancient prophecy that goes all the way back to Cain and Abel. Due to this sort of fucked up reversion of a reward, it kind of screws up Dean's head, and he begins to interpret the feelings that he gets while torturing as being enjoyment, due to the fact that it's not him on the rack this time and he is relieved. And it's a lot. This is an actual phenomenon that can occur if you put a person in pain but then allow them a reprieve of pain by hurting someone else. This fucks with the actual chemistry of your brain and subconsciously makes you connect the dots of hurting someone else and happy chemicals when this is not actually how you feel about hurting other people. Dean is obviously horrifically traumatized from this and is so ashamed of what he did, he doesn't even tell Sam for ages. And when he does, he tries to pretend like it didn't happen. Sam even notes this, telling Dean that he's been throwing himself into work to try to avoid what he told Sam. This guilt seems to run so deep in spite of reassurances from others. It stays with him for a long time, very clearly. I think it's because he knows now that he has the potential to torture others horrifically to an extent that most people wouldn't even be able to imagine. He's absolutely terrified that if he begins doing so again, to any extent, he will immediately revert back to this. I think Dean, to a degree, believes he has a limit to his own autonomy, that if pushed far enough, he will turn into a monster. He's terrified of himself. He hates that he has seen the darkest part of himself and cannot reconcile that with the caring side of himself, the side that drives him. I think he kind of believes that he's intrinsically bad or destined to be violent and wants to prevent this in any way possible. When Dean is dragged out of hell by Castiel, it's an absolute fucking mess for a relationship at some point. He is very distrustful of him and even tries to stab him with a demon knife. There's this whole scene which I'm just gonna play. Dean believes that due to the things he did in hell, he doesn't, deserve to be saved, as was said in this scene. He believes that he must complete this sort of weird penance for what he did, that he didn't try hard enough to resist torturing others in spite of the fact that he was tortured horrifically for 30 fucking years. He believes that to an extent he should be punished for his actions further than what hell can provide. So, Dean feels extremely guilty, and he just never really processes that, and he is terrified of becoming of that again. This is seen most clearly in another episode of season 4, On the Head of a Pin, which is the 17th episode. In this episode, he is forced by the angels to torture Alistair, who taught him as the demon that taught him to torture in hell in order to get information from him, because a bunch of angels have recently just dying, which is not good. He really doesn't want to fucking do this, but eventually he relents. During this episode, he also shows a degree of empathy towards Castiel because he almost dies, where before he had only shown distrust and apathy for the angels, he actually seems to care. He also refuses being Michael's vessel. Like, he just gets told about this while he's in a hospital room by Cass. And obviously there's just an absolute fucking bomb to be dropped on your life. Dean does not like it and tells Cass to find someone else, believing he isn't strong enough to take up the role, citing his time in hell as to why. Also, we get to Adam. So Adam shows up in season 4, episode 19, Jump the Shark, and is the Winchester's half-brother. Apparently John slept around a lot after Mary died while he was on hunts and accidentally got a woman pregnant. And now Adam exists. He will be back, don't worry. Anyway, so Dean does not like him initially because he had a healthier relationship with John than Dean did. No, they literally didn't know that Adam, a whole ass half brother existed up until this point. Adam tells this story of John taking him to a baseball game for his 16th birthday and how John acted normal with him and encouraged him to chase after his fairly normal dreams. Dean does not like this and tells Adam that only he and Sam are John's sons. This whole thing continues throughout the episode, and at some point I ask myself, can you not just be happy for the guy? But I'm about to explain why that's difficult. Also, I literally can't criticize him. Dean does this because he's jealous of Adam. Adam got the life that Dean was never afforded, the life that John never gave him, and had the power to give him. John showed Adam all of, fucking normal all-American bullshit to do, and never got him involved with any of the monster-killing bullshit, and never tells him about 2 half-brothers that he has. I think the reason why Dean refuses to acknowledge Adam as his brother, because he didn't have to endure the same trauma Dean, Sam, and John had to experience together, most of which was actually caused by John. It creates sort of this conscious thought. Relationships are built on trauma instead of trust. And that's really sad and fucked up, but that is what dysfunctional families are like. It's not fun. In spite of this, at the end of the episode, Adam dies, and Dean finally accepts that he was their brother and that he deserved better than dying in this way, and he shouldn't have been such a bitch to him. Dean seems at peace with the idea, even giving him a hunter's funeral, which is for hunters a massive sign of respect. I think through this, subconsciously, he does process some of his emotions and trauma, which is good. But it's interesting Adam had to fucking die in order for that to happen. And like I said before, sort of this subconscious idea that relationships are built on trauma instead of trust. And I feel like this is a really clear example of that, because Adam had to be traumatized and die in order for Dean to consider him family, to develop this connection with him. I don't like it here. As the story progresses, Heaven continues to insist on him being Michael's vessel, which slowly wears him down, because if you have the literal fucking angels, beings who were formed by God himself and were some of the first things around, constantly bugging you about it, you are probably going to say yes at some point. Like, for example, Zachariah, who's basically the Regina George of angels, shows him what will happen if he says no. It's not confirmed whether this was just Zachariah screwing with him or if this was another timeline that could have actually happened. Universe, which I'm going to refer to as the N-verse from now on. The apocalypse has happened. Sam is Lucifer's vessel because he said yes to Lucifer in Detroit? Yeah. Castiel is no longer an angel and has become a drug addict who follows Dean no matter what. And they live in a camp with a group of others. This whole demonic virus has taken over. It's implied that pretty much everyone else is dead or at least the human population has been decreased significantly. Human, very important word. Yeah, and it sucks. Enderverse Dean is old and calloused, and he tortures people, which Dean promised himself he would never do again. And at the end of the episode, leads the camp, and there's quite a big focus on this whole conversation between Enderverse Dean and Enderverse Cass about whether or not Cass will go with Dean on this suicide mission. And Cass basically says, yeah, what else? What else am I gonna do? Like, of course I will. And it's presumed that this is how most of them die, including Enderverse Dean. We see Sam/Lucifer snap his neck. Yeah. And Dean is obviously fucking horrified by this, and of what he's become and how he treats the people around him, Cass in specific. And obviously, Zachariah has told him, hey, this is what's going to happen if you say no to Michael. So obviously Dean's going to say yes to Michael now. There's also like a lot of Cain and Abel parallels going on here, but a quick rundown is that Dean is the perfect vessel for Michael and Sam is the perfect vessel for Lucifer. Heaven and hell respectively are trying to push them towards taking on their respective leaders. Dean decides to say yes to Michael. Sam is not keen on Lucifer, because I mean, Michael's an angel, Lucifer's, well, an angel, but he's also the literal fucking devil. Cool. Turns out Adam was brought back for the sole purpose of being a sort of backup vessel for Michael in case Dean decided to say no. I think Dean believes he's going to say yes until Cass basically tells him he would rather die than see Dean say yes, and does something that, honestly, was really fucking stupid. Carves an angel banishing sigil on his chest and then fucking activates it. And obviously no one's ever done this before, but the general assumption is if you do something like that, you are going to die. And it seems that between the time Cass says this and Dean is preparing himself to say yes to Michael, he decides not to say yes. Because he sees how far Cass in specific has gone. You know, the whole like betraying Kevin, literally dying and maybe being dead. And yeah, it was all because Cass didn't want Dean to say yes to Michael, so I think Dean just kind of goes, oh shit, maybe I shouldn't do that. They do try to save Adam. He gets possessed by Michael because, you know, backup vessel. At the end of season 5, Sam becomes Lucifer's vessel and throws the both of them into the cage, which, as you can probably guess from the name, is a cage in hell designed to contain Lucifer. And, I mean, the sort of final showdown scene I find really, really interesting, because even when Lucifer, possessing Sam, is trying to kill Dean, Dean refuses to fight back. He refuses to hurt Lucifer/Sam because he doesn't want to end up accidentally hurting Sam. Like, once again, trying to protect others at the detriment of himself, even when they are possessed by the actual fucking devil. But anyway, after this, Dean finally decides to quit hunting and settle down with Lisa and her son Ben. He seems to be content, ? This. But in the 6th season, he ends up confessing that he wasn't content, actually, simply sitting around and having the all-American white picket fence lifestyle. And this is because Dean has internalized this idea that the ideal life, the normal life, is not for him. It's not something he can have. It becomes this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy where he's been told this and shown this for so long that he truly cannot believe that he can have this. So when he tries, it never worked because his subconscious is constantly planning against him. Sam rocks back up, being pulled out of hell by Cass, which it's never explained how Cass managed to do that. Like, sure, he managed to pull Dean out of hell. And, like, I can accept that. He was not in, you know, the cage. We also meet the Campbells, which is Mary's side of the family, who were dead but have now been resurrected. So there's Gwen, Christian, and Mark, who are their third cousins, and Samuel, their grandfather. So I'll be referring to Sam Winchester as Sam and Samuel Campbell as Samuel to try to avoid any confusion. The Campbells basically just tried to drag back Dean. Oh my god. To drag Dean back into hunting. There we go. Obviously this ends up putting Lisa and Ben in danger. It's really clear that Dean cares a lot for Lisa and Ben, seeing them as part of their family and purposefully keeping them away from hunting in order to protect them. Lisa did know about the hunting and the whole Michael Lucifer thing, but obviously didn't completely understand it. Dean still kept a lot of her from both her and continuing to be closed off to the people he cares about and acting like there's nothing wrong, because it would be too painful to explain his own feelings and anguish around the matter. He also sees himself as weak if he did this, which to him is the ultimate failure due to being a protector of the people he loves. Ben knows next to nothing about hunting, other than monsters do exist but that he's safe from them, because Dean's there. Dean has this father-son relationship that seems quite healthy, actually, up until, Dean starts losing his mind a bit. A very stark contrast to the relationship Dean had with John. He loves Ben and he wants to help him grow up as well as keep him away from the childhood that Dean had. In this, we can kind of see that Dean is still petrified of becoming like his father, so he's avoiding anything his father would do. And in doing so, he acknowledges that the way his father parented was at least unintentionally neglectful, and at the worst, actively abusive. When the Campbells and Sam offer him the opportunity to get back into hunting, he initially refuses, wanting to go back to Lisa and Ben, wanting to still try. The Campbells have this very weird, scornful nature towards this. Looking down on people who actively want to get themselves out of a job that kills most people. As Dean drags further into the hunting lifestyle, once again, he becomes more paranoid about Lisa and Ben, eventually isolating them from the outside world. And he even hits Ben at one point for sneaking through his shit. He also begins to take complete control over Ben and Lisa's lives, hiding them away from the rest of the world, shouting, arguing, basically becoming like his dad. Dean, I think, naturally goes to this because it's the only way he was protected by his own father as a child, never taught any other way. He sees what he is becoming, and he eventually leaves Ben and Lisa, go back to hunting, still with the promise that he'll visit, but albeit pretty much leaving in order to protect them from both himself and the external forces that are always fucking after him. At the same time, there's a civil war in heaven going on, with Castiel being head of one of the forces and Raphael, who is an archangel, so obviously a lot more powerful than Cass, who is a seraphim, which, if you don't know, is below an archangel. Archangels are some of the first few beings in existence and are fucking uber powerful. Yeah, that's going on at the same time. He does ask for help, which Dean does agree to, but then Sam and Cass torture a child. By a child, I do mean 15, 16-year-old. But that's still quite fucked up. Just unhinged behaviour all round. Dean is very much against this, but even after this happened, he's still very close to Cass and is prepared to help kill an archangel for him. He refuses to leave his side when he does these objectively bad things, and vice versa. Once again, these two have become trauma bonded and somewhat codependent, because Dean literally cannot form meaningful connections with people he hasn't been traumatized with, because it's the only way he's ever developed relationships. Okay, let's focus in on an episode for a hot minute. In the episode, you can't handle the truth whilst under the spell of the goddess Veritas, who is the goddess of truth. He just spills to Sam about how he feels about him and the grudges he holds, but tries to ignore. Around this time, he's also started to figure out that Sam is without soul, which is bad. If you haven't guessed, the soul is a pretty essential part of being a human being. Dean forgives Sam for a lot of shit, but just a couple of episodes ago, Sam almost let Dean die. Dean feels betrayed and extremely hurt by this, which is incredibly understandable. That not even the person he's been protecting his whole life, that he gave up his whole childhood for, doesn't care. Doesn't care. To him, this is just more proof that no one will ever truly care about him outside of a weapon or a tool for him to use. Another theme is that Dean deals with his feelings through violence. He was never shown another way, he never saw another way. John presumably did similar shit to Dean, just like punched stuff and went on hunts. And when he couldn't do that, got drunk as fuck. Whenever Dean feels like a negative emotion, he expresses it through violence, because how else is he meant to? Yeah, Sam's soul is still in the fucking cage. The Campbells still have their souls. Soulless dicks, they're dicks with souls, I guess. We also see a very new thing in Dean, which is he doesn't trust family, specifically the Campbells and soulless Sam. Most of the time, we see Dean trusting family with blind faith, relying on them not to lie to him. After it's revealed that Sam has no soul, this obviously kind of just fucked that belief right up. Dean doesn't see Sam as Sam anymore, he doesn't have a soul. But the Campbells, Dean is basically suspicious from them the moment he meets them. This is not helped by the fact that Sam was actually alive for a couple of months and hunting with the Campbells before Dean even knew he was alive. And the Campbells went along with not informing Dean of Sam being alive. Still, this goes against most of the things Dean has previously stated and been taught about family. The Campbells are Mary's side of the family, which feels quite trustworthy, you know, like these were Mary's parents, your mother. Like, Samuel is Mary's father. You'd think that Dean would immediately trust him due to that, but it's quite the opposite. The same goes for the rest of the Campbells. The cousins do not like him, and Samuel is suspicious towards Dean at best and worst, actively passive-aggressive. This definitely shows Dean just progressing further past John's ideals and creating his own. Dean's suspicions are further compounded by the fact that the Campbells were, in fact, lying to the both of them. They were capturing monsters and selling them to Crowley in order to help him open purgatory, which is kind of like the middle bit between heaven and hell. It's where all the monsters go when they die, and where the mother of all monsters, Eve. And it's never actually confirmed whether she's like Bible Garden of Eden Eve, but she's called Eve. And this includes selling Crowley shit like alphas, which are basically the top dogs in whatever species they belong to. They're like the first. He makes a deal with Crowley. Dean makes a deal with Crowley. He has to capture an alpha in exchange for Sam's soul. And Dean doesn't even really try to, like, I don't really know how to explain it, bargain? But this is a very impulsive decision, which Dean makes a lot of. Like, Dean operates based on emotion most of the time. Logic. What's that? I also think that Dean, to some degree, does sympathise with demons, or can at least understand that they aren't doing everything for their own personal gain. Like, he works with Meg to take down Crowley, albeit reluctantly, but he pushes aside his slowly deteriorating black and white thinking for this pursuit of greater good. He understands that there are things bigger than him, and that he might have to compromise his beliefs for. And that's a very mature thing to do. Well done, sir. Sam doesn't want his soul back. Dean is going to get it back no matter what. And I want to talk about this for a moment, because a lot of people cite this as Dean somehow taking Sam's agency. A soul is what makes a person a person, and someone should have that no matter what. It's not like a violation of agency to give a soulless person their soul back, even if they don't want it, because it's an essential part of being human. Just stop. Also seems like at this point, Cass and Bobby are the only people Dean fully trusts, probably because the Campbells betrayed him, and all of them other than, I think, Gwen and Samuel are dead. I mean, I know they both die at some point during this season, but I'm not sure if they're dead at this point. But anyway, and Sam is soulless. Would you really want to confide in a soulless person who's displayed the inability to feel any sort of empathy, emotional or cognitive, and resorts to violence without second thought? No. Probably not. Bobby's relationship with Dean is a whole fucking other thing. But quick rundown, it's kind of like a surrogate father deal. Bobby was somewhat around during his childhood and sort of offered him this safe space as a child that his own father did not offer him. Once again, daddy issues. And due to this, I think that Bobby almost became this sort of safe haven for Dean, the person who let him act like a child and gave him that space to do that. And this ended up forming a very strong bond between the two that can't really be broken. Dean's once again going to insane lengths in his role as a protector, eventually making a deal with death to do his job for 24 hours in order to get Sam's soul back. During this episode, Dean breaks the deal in order to save a 12-year-old girl with a heart condition, despite another Reaper's insistence that if he does that, he could potentially kill others who would die due to this one decision. Butterfly effect. This shows that Dean does have an incredibly strong sense of morality and feels as though he has to protect this child, even if it could potentially alter the very fabric of reality. Eventually, Dean does reverse this decision due to the fact that it kills someone else and almost kills another. In doing so, he kind of fully breaks the deal. I think this represents that Dean won't do anything for Sam. He is still his own person, his own morals. Like, he has a very strong moral compass that is difficult to break down. His protection of Sam doesn't make him, as John led Dean to believe. His morals and thoughts and feelings do, and just him as a person, him as an individual. Sam gets his soul back, and Death puts a wall up in his mind to make sure he cannot remember anything that happened, because if he does, it might kill him. Dean lies to Sam, as per, about what happened during his time being sold. And Cass eventually tells Sam. Dean is pissed and calls Cass a child. I feel like this is another example of him directing his anger towards someone else when really he's just pissed at himself for making a shitty decision. Once again, thanks, John. Projecting your feelings onto your children definitely didn't fuck them up and make them repeat the same patterns. Cool. In spite of this, Dean continues to refuse to tell Sam about what happened when he was soulless. And his reasoning is actually pretty good. I will say that. Because if do not chip away at the wall, it might come crashing down and then everything will go to shit. Anyway, towards the end of season 6, we see this very interesting dichotomy between Dean and Sam and Bobby concerning Cass. By this point, Cass is basically Dean's closest friend and has a, quote, profound bond with him. Bobby and Sam begin to suspect that Cass is working with Crowley in order to open Purgatory. There is a lot of weird shit that Cass has been doing, such as sun is setting, and it's fucked up my lighting even more. I guess we're just gonna have to do it like this now. So, Bobby and Sam begin to suspect that Cass is working with Crowley in order to open Purgatory. There's just a lot of weird shit that Cass has been doing, such as potentially letting Crowley get away from a fatal situation where it would be almost impossible to escape without help. Dean does not believe this at all, not until the final fucking moment. He's just, he's constantly saying shit like, it's Cass, How could it be him? This even ends up putting him at odds with Sam and Bobby, who he also considers his family. And I mean, it's not something we've ever really seen Dean do before, seeing him care about someone so much and believe in them so much that he damages his relationships with the people he considers his family. He does go along with not telling Cass about certain things, but he makes it well known that he doesn't think this is a good idea. He thinks that they should tell him everything. They should let Cass be involved. Cool, now I get on to the part where I ramble. To be fair, I've been rambling this whole video. I barely have a script. But to Dean, I think Cass represents faith. Faith in the world at large. Like, Cass is an angel that rebelled against heaven and everything he'd ever known for billions of years. For Dean, I think Dean sees Cass as his connection to faith, due to the faith he had shown Dean even when he was on the verge of death. Even when, like, all of this shit was going on. Like, it is revealed that Cass is working with Crowley to open Purgatory, and Dean feels completely fucking betrayed, as one would, and his relationship with Cass is shattered in that one fucking kryptonite comment. I am so normal about this. But even in the face of this revelation, it's shown that Dean does still care for Cass and wants to help him. Dean wants to help him at least get out or stop whatever he can before it gets any further. And I think that little moment, I hope you know the one I'm talking about. The one where they've trapped Cass in, like, the ring of holy fire and all of those fucking demon smokers coming out of the dirt. And there's just this moment where Dean stops and looks back at Cass, and even in that moment you can tell that, like, Cass has done something really fucking shitty. That's horrible. Why would you do that? But Dean still cares about him till Cass, fucking eats fuck ton of souls. He refuses to give up on Cass, because if he gives up on Cass, he loses his faith. Dean does threaten to kill him at one point, though, and I see this more as a desperate attempt to convince Cass to stop. In that scene, Dean could have killed Cass if he wanted to, but he fucking didn't. Like, that was an empty threat. I think deep down, he knew that if he didn't stop Cass in time, he will have to kill him. The threat is still empty. Dean is talking about if Cass actually completely lost it. Then, in Bobby's house, no, he fucking wouldn't have. I think at this point, Dean is just really, really desperate. He's trying to stop one of the people he cares most about from making a horrific decision that could cause massive destruction and kill so many people. And I think at this point, he realizes that if he had tried to help Cass with the war in heaven, he wouldn't have ended up going this far. He wouldn't have ended up turning to Crowley and trying to open fucking Purgatory. And I just suspect he started to blame himself for this, and therefore sort of fell into this pit of desperation where he has to resort to threatening him in order to try and get him to stop. He doesn't know what else to do. Like, this is a bit later on, but I think this is exemplified by Cass dying in the lake and, Dean tormenting himself with the images of Castiel's death, because he knows he could have helped, he could have listened more about the war in heaven. And I feel like he can tell himself, as much as he wants to, that it wasn't his fault. But Dean's conscience is naturally guilty. Okay, we are back to season 6. Forget about Cass dying for a moment. I keep jumping all over the place, I'm so sorry. Anyway, Lisa and Ben get captured, but they are okay in the end. Dean asks Cass to erase their memories of him, and then we just never see them again. This is just a combo of Dean's insane self-hatred and copy-paste everything I said about hunters can't have a normal life here. He also tells Sam to never mention them again, or he'll break his nose. Not only does Dean use violence as a coping mechanism, he also uses it occasionally as a control tactic. Once again, since it's the only way he's been shown, teach your kids good coping mechanisms, otherwise they might end up like me or Dean Winchester. You don't fucking want that, do you? He was surrounded by violence at such a young age. it's shown Dean that the only way he can communicate with others is through violence. Like, the only acceptable way to communicate with others is through violence. And it's the only way to set boundaries and do all of this stuff, because communication is key to building relationships, and just these very human things just become replaced with violence. And that's scary. So he uses violence the same way his father did against others. And this isn't just Dean, by the way. Sam beats Dean up quite a bit. Yeah. Cool. Cass fucking dies. Is rapidly deteriorating because Cass took the wall in his mind down. I don't even know why. Like, it's never really explained. He kind of just does that. Yeah, at this point, I think Dean is really struggling with the fact that Castiel is dead, so now doing everything in his power to protect Sam from his own memories, and he's terrified of losing someone again. Losing someone so close to him kind of like slips more and more into becoming his father again, the proverbial prison guard watching and controlling every move that Sam makes. Dean does seem to improve upon communication slightly, which is progress. Like, talking to Sam about his hallucinations and regularly asking him if he's okay, and also like encouraging Sam to find a way to get rid of hallucination Lucifer. Good on you. And then throughout the rest of season 7 and 8, Dean is very much in his protector role, as he believes that his value is measured by, well, he can protect his family. Great. Especially when Sam ends up in a mental hospital. Dean is fucking hell-bent on finding a way to get rid of this psychosis Sam has fallen into. This eventually leads him to Cass, who is alive but cannot remember shit about being an angel or the Winchesters. Like, he just thinks he's some kind of miracle healer. See, Cass remembers and takes on Sam's memories from hell and therefore his hallucinations. Whole psychosis thing. This results in Cass being comatose. Don't smoke, kids. Anyway, Dean decides to leave him with Meg for some godforsaken reason.
I love you, Meg, really.
But he is shown to be very guilty about this because Dean has to blame everything on himself. Because if he doesn't, then he realises how shit all of the people around him are, and how that not all of that they are not good. Look, no one in the show is a good person, okay? I think one of the reasons why he's so guilty about this is, once again, protect a sort of parental role, and also immediately getting Cass back, using him to fight against the angels, demons, allowing him to take on Sam's memories, and then immediately throwing him in a mental hospital. Like, could we not have found another way? I do feel like he needs to sort of value himself less, because he failed. He failed in his protector role, and therefore deems himself less valuable. Oh, also, Bobby dies, which, actual dad and your father figure being like 5-6 years apart. Dude, what the fuck? Despite this, he is still driven by his desire to do what is right and help others. Kevin is also introduced in season 7, who Dean clearly cares about. Like, he shows Kevin how to protect himself and teaching him the absolute basics of hunting. He also empathizes with Kevin. His mother, Linda, is in danger, and Crowley claims to have killed her. I think Dean saw himself in Kevin, someone thrown into a world they had no idea existed before, and having this incredibly important role thrust upon him. Kevin being a prophet of God, Dean being the true vessel for Michael. Also saw himself in the grief Kevin experienced when he thought Linda was dead, becoming hell-bent on killing Crowley but being forced to work with him, and understanding that even though this is for the greater good, he killed his mum. I think Dean understands this and sort of appeals to the side of Kevin that he knows is still there behind this desire for vengeance, the compassionate side of him that knows they need Crowley in order to close the gates of hell for the greater good. This works, and I think that almost helped Dean to realise that he also has this compassionate and loving side to him, even when he's put in these horrific situations, and feels as if even when he believes that he is only built from revenge, He looks at Kevin and he sees himself in him, and Kevin demonstrably proves that to be untrue. Then Dean and Cass get thrown into purgatory by Dick. I do want to talk about Benny for a hot minute. So Benny is a vampire that he met in purgatory who helped him find Cass. Purgatory is often referred to as a pure place, as it strips the entities in it down to their most basic instincts. Throughout the series, Dean's opinions on monsters change quite a lot. He initially believes that they are all evil and cannot be changed, and therefore must be killed. He grows and meets vampires and werewolves and the like, who instead feast on animals instead of killing people. This idea begins to evolve and change. A vampire, this is in direct opposition to his initial belief, which was instilled in him by John. Fuck you, John. I feel like this whole thing sort of changes him and gives him the capacity to work with monsters as well as see beyond his own world and into the world of these monsters who actively try to avoid hurting others, often to their own detriment. Dean's relationship with Benny is sort of the culmination of this, where he becomes close with Benny, working with him to find Cass. Even when Dean and Benny return to Earth, Dean still speaks to him and cares for him. Benny is struggling with feeding on blood bags and animals instead of just people, and finds other ways to assist him instead of just killing him without a second thought like he may have done before. Even when Sam wants Benny dead, refuses to kill him because he doesn't believe that Benny is past saving. But unfortunately, he does end up having to kill Benny, but not for him killing her, but it's in order to get to purgatory, and Benny gladly offers himself up, saying that he should have stayed dead, and even reassures Dean that he wants this and that he isn't doing anything wrong. Benny and Dean's relationship marks a point where Dean fully destroys his idea that all monsters are bad and must be killed. Earlier on in the series, he follows the beliefs of his father instilled on him from the time that he was only a child. But this is one of the clearest examples of Dean completely destroying a belief that his father held so dearly. There's also an odd thing that goes on when Dean comes back, where Sam has retired from hunting and met a woman. Unfortunately, this didn't work out, but Sam admits not trying to find Dean as he thought Dean was dead. I find this super interesting, as Sam and Dean often say to each other, like, if the other dies, move on and live a normal life. Sam does this, and Dean is fucking livid. I think this is because he sees this as the equivalent of Sam, his own brother, abandoning him in his time of need. That even after all they've been through together, Sam didn't care about him and abandoned him, where Dean had always tried to find Sam when he needed help. I think Dean remembered his father, always abandoning him when he needed help in spite of all the things he did for John. At least that's what I thought while looking back on this. Dean felt like an abandoned child in a motel room again. When Cass does come back, because these bitches want to kill him off so fucking badly, but he is too important to the plot now. Dean's general mood just seems to improve. Also does display capacity for more open communication with the people he loves. For example, Dean allows Castiel to confide in him about his feelings during Season 8, Episode 8, Hunterai Heroikai. I really hope I said that right. This conversation is interrupted. I still think it shows how much Dean has improved his communication with the people he loves. He's clearly very concerned about Castiel, and suspicious shit starts happening. Fucking Naomi. Even when Cass is almost forced to kill Dean, Dean refuses to hurt him, even in self-defense. He is so scared of losing Cass again that he's willing to die. That's what Naomi was trying to get Cass to do. And Dean fucking knew that. In the end of Season 8, Dean also apologizes for his years of mistakes towards Sam and accepts Sam's apology for his respective years of mistakes. Once again, Dean has this massive capacity for forgiveness and love, and understand that ultimately it's so much better to forgive others than hold grudges against them. Dean obviously struggles with forgiveness from how he was brought up, still understands as he grows that he should forgive the ones he loves because they aren't gonna fucking be around forever. Neither is he. He watches so many people around him die and get hurt all the time. He loses the same people multiple times over. Through this, learns that it is so much better to forgive people rather than watch them die thinking that you actually forgave them. Okay, cool. Sam's fallen into a coma now, and Dean prays to the fallen angels for help. Oh yeah, they all fucking fell. Like, all of them. Locked out of heaven. No more wings. Despite everything that's happened with heaven and the angels, Dean still thinks that there must be good in heaven. Even if only held within a few angels. Like, he still believes in the goodness despite all he's seen. This is also another example of how far he's willing to go to save the people he loves, even doing some morally questionable things, like tricking Sam into allowing the angel Gadriel to his body. I will say that Dean initially thought he was Ezekiel, had a good reputation within heaven, and who Cass liked, and who Dean asked Cass about. On the other hand, Gadriel has done some unhinged fucking shit. Dean also displays he can work with demons other than Meg by working with Crowley, who helped open Purgatory. This is begrudgingly, but he does trust Crowley to a degree. Castiel ends up dying at the hands. So, Cass is homeless now and being hunted by all the angels, and Dean is trying to find him. My guy is just juggling fucking everything over here. He's not having a good... But, anyway, Cass ends up dying at the hands of a Reaper, which... Ooh... Buddy, I'm going to definitely get into that whole mess of very, very fucking dubious consent. Probably not in this... Definitely not in this video, but at some point in the future. Anyway, Gadriel forces Dean to make Cass leave, which leaves Cass homeless and once again hunted by all the angels. Once again, Dean is really fucking guilty over this, and he often argues with Gadriel over this, and even threatens him at a couple of points, only backing down when Gadriel is like, hey bro, if I leave Sam, he's gonna fucking die. The trials basically fried his fucking insides, if you're wondering why. So Dean hates Gadriel. We also see more of Charlie, and I would like to talk about Dean's relationship with Charlie for a hot minute. Okay, here we go. Dean sees Charlie as a younger sister, much in contrast to the relationships he has had with other women. I will discuss the rampant misogyny that Dean is a vessel for, because the writers just hate women, especially in the earlier seasons. Holy shit. Anyway, with other women, he either hooks up with them, sees them as a motherly figure, or, as we'll see with Charlie, sees them as a sister. Before he knows that Charlie is a lesbian, he never tries to hit on her or flirt with her or anything. And they even bond over their shared interest in the fact that Charlie is a massive fucking dork. Now, once again, I think the reason why he puts Charlie in this younger sister role is Dean wanting to protect her, wanting to shield the people around him from they are often put in. He sees Charlie honest and calm with a normal future, oftentimes encouraging her to turn her back on everything supernatural and go get a girlfriend and have a career and whatever the fuck else she wants. To me, this feels like Dean trying to push Charlie out of the hunter lifestyle due to the fact that he believes he is already so far beyond saving when it comes to leaving the hunter lifestyle. Dean has seen so many hunters try to leave and usually fail with the people around them dying or getting hurt. This happened with Ben and Lisa, so he's internalized this belief. He himself is long gone, but he sees that Charlie hasn't. So Dean is constantly trying to get her to leave. Obviously this doesn't work. Charlie ends up dying on the job. Dean also seems to be much more open with affection when it comes to Charlie, telling her that he loves her and hugging her and shit. Charlie brings out more joking part of Dean. Sorry, I keep stuttering. Both of them end up very close. I think this might be because John clearly taught Dean to be this hyper-masculine guy who shows no affection and loves banging women. I think because Charlie undermines all these things that Dean was taught by John. She's a lesbian, she's intelligent, she enjoys LARPing and geeking out about the things she's interested in that would usually be embarrassing. She simply doesn't care. She doesn't give a shit what others think about her and lives herself without hesitation. I think this makes him feel safe and like he can express himself around her without worrying about pulling down this facade of the son that John wanted and Dean has been trying to be. Charlie, I think, sort of starts to deconstruct this. When Charlie almost dies, Dean is almost completely willing to blow the lid on the whole Sam being possessed by an angel thing in order to save her. Not caring that well, Sam might find out and this could destroy their relationship. Dean obviously cares deeply for Charlie and loves her. Gadriel kills Kevin, and I really think during this time Dean's faith starts to waver. He watches this person he was meant to protect, as they didn't have any sort of knowledge about the supernatural, a world that Dean felt a need to protect others from, die at the hands of an angel he let into their lives based on an impulse decision. Kevin, who didn't deserve to die, who didn't do anything wrong, who just happened to be thrown into this absolute shit show that ruined his life. A lot of people in the show do some really fucked up shit. Though quite a lot of it is somewhat justified, Kevin never really did anything to warrant being killed. So in Dean's mind, it really cements that his spur of the moment decisions lead to people being killed that simply didn't deserve dying in such a way, and that his impulsivity doesn't only harm himself but others too. Okay, so Dean decides to split from Sam to try and find a way to kill this demon called Abaddon, and an angel with a god complex called Metatron, who betrayed Cass and made all the angels fall. Dean even goes as far as to team up with Crowley. For some reason, Crowley just constantly fucking switches between, like, being an antagonist and being like a, what's it fucking called, an anti-villain? I don't know. It's weird. Basically, the supernatural writers don't know what the fuck they're doing with the characters. Dean then takes on the mark of Cain from the biblical Cain. Yes. From Cain and Abel in the Bible in order to kill Abaddon with the first blade. Which is obviously just a shitty fucking decision because, you know, fucking Cain from the Bible. And Cain slowly turns whoever takes it into like a very, very violent person who will eventually kill everyone. And I mean everyone. And the mark doesn't let you die either. It's a shit show. Like everyone on the planet. Obviously there's Cain and Abel parallels along with the Cain and Colette parallels, but I don't have enough fucking time to get into that. This video is already really long. Okay, anyway, Dean does kill Abaddon, but he still has the mark, and seemingly killing Abaddon made the desire to kill worse. And proposes that if it gets too bad, he should throw them in this box called the Malak box, which is a box that can basically contain any entity other than God, Mara, and Jack. And at this point, everything is really fucking hopeless, and at some points it seems like Dean is borderline suicidal. Anyway, Dean fucking dies. He's killed by Metatron. Crowley brings Dean back as a demon, and it's fucking lit, apparently. There's also this, like, weird one-sided romantic relationship with Dean and Crowley. I don't know why, but that's how I interpreted it. The world's most fucked up love triangle. I think about that post on, like, a daily basis. Like, I go back and look at it every single day. I'm fucking insane. Okay, so being a demon basically turns Dean into this, like, morally grey bad bitch who kills this guy who hired Dean to kill his wife because she's cheating. But then the guy who hired him turned out to be the one cheating first. And then the guy goes on this, like, whole fucking it's different when men do it type thing, which I feel like if this dude would have just shut his fucking mouth and ended it at I cheat her, he probably would have gotten away with that, but no, hon. You had to go say some misogynistic shit and get killed. I didn't even feel bad for him, honestly. Go off. So Dean is cured of his demonness, which, yes, that's something you can do now, apparently. And he seemingly doesn't feel any guilt for anything he did, which is definitely a change from Dean feeling guilty about fucking everything. I think this is definitely because he only killed one person and didn't actually kill Cole. Whole other side plot. Irrelevant. Unfortunately, he still has the fucking mark, and it is not getting any better. No one knows what to do. No one knows what to do. But despite this, the mark doesn't take away all of Dean's good qualities. He still retains the capacity to comfort and forgive people. For example, when Cass finds Claire and tries to apologise to her, act as a father figure as he took away her father by possessing him. But she harshly rejects this and tells him that she doesn't think he's actually sorry for what he did and that he's just guilty. She then runs away. Cass is obviously just, I don't know, man. He's just not having a good time, basically, and Dean and Sam take him out to a bar and try to cheer him up, and it does help a bit. So, in spite of the mark, Dean still possesses these traits he already did, like compassion, forgiveness, and protectiveness, and the like. But in this episode, A man tries to rape Claire. Like, there's this gang of dudes, and the leader tries to rape Claire, and the other group members threaten to kill the other people in the house, who are just like a bunch of fucking randos, by the way. And Dean just goes full fucking murder mode on every single one of them. And it's actually pretty brutal, especially for a character like Dean. Like, he wouldn't usually do something like that, at least not as brutally. And it's sort of this righteous anger towards these horrific people who hurt others for no reason, warped into something brutal and violent and not driven by a sense of justice anymore. But the justice is just fuel to the fire of wanting brutality. Like, he didn't actually need to do that, and it's never shown whether he feels particularly guilty about this due to the fact that these people were going to hurt others and stand by and allow their leader to rape a teenage girl. So, but this is sort of treated as the first point of no return, and by that I mean everyone kind of sees this as the first, like, massive act of violence caused by the mark that is very out of character for Dean. And everyone, specifically Cass and Sam, to consider the fact that they might have to kill Dean or contain him within the Malak box forever. Dean even makes Cass promise to kill him or put him in the Malak box if he ever got that far, which Cass obviously doesn't want to. He doesn't even want to entertain the idea, but Dean still makes Cass promise because he believes that if he gets that far, Cass will either be the only one who can do it or the only one around to do it. But Dean sees Cass as someone who will always do what is right, but I think through this, Dean realizes that Cass is very similar to him. Even when they should do something for the greater good, they won't if it means hurting someone they love. Dean kills Kane, therefore becoming exactly like him, directly paralleling Kane killing killers in the world in order to rid that part of himself. It doesn't work, it doesn't change fucking everything. And there's this moment where Dean is so tired that he allows himself a moment of rest. He basically just collapses. He's that fucking tired. Like, it's not something we've really seen before. Dean allowing himself a moment of rest for once. Really heartbreaking moment, because that's one hell of a breaking point. Dean has given up. He doesn't want to find a cure anymore. Just wants Sam and Cass to throw him in the Malak box and be done with it. They don't do this, and Dean continues to try to contain the mark, which is harder and harder the more he kills, which isn't conducive to his fucking job, which is killing monsters. Meanwhile, behind his back, Sam, Charlie, Rowena, Cass, and Crowley are trying to figure out how the actual fuck to get rid of the mark. And during this point, Charlie has mostly gotten away from the hunting life, but obviously Sam drags her back in. And then Charlie is killed by Nazis, that's sure a writing decision. This causes Dean to go fucking mental and kills this whole family of Nazis, including, like, an 18-year-old. Like, I don't even think he's fucking 18. His age was never said, but he was referred to as a kid and a teenager quite a few times. And almost kills Cass. Once again, Dean watches this person who he loved a lot die. An innocent person who just wanted to help, nothing more. Who was dragged back into this world by Sam when she was almost out. I think this sort of represented the death of goodness to Dean, seeing Charlie as the most morally sound out of all of them, and still retaining her own hope in the process. I think that's one of the reasons why he did this. I also find the part where he almost kills Cass very interesting, because it directly parallels Kane and Colette. Colette is Kane's wife who begs him not to continue on this path and allow her to help him. This whole scenario perfectly parallels this. Castiel, in spite of knowing how Dean taking on the mark of Cain will most likely end, he refuses to give up on Dean, refuses to kill him or put him in the Malak box, refuses to defend himself because he doesn't want to hurt Dean. And even though Dean is furious and hates Cass in that moment, he cannot bring himself to kill him. It also kind of parallels the crypt scene. Dean and Cass can never bring themselves to kill each other, never bring themselves to deal the final blow. And during this whole thing, Cass refuses to fight back, refuses to defend himself. I think this just makes him more enraged that no matter what, no matter how hard he hit Cass, no matter how hard he hurt him, no matter how close Dean got to killing Cass, the motherfucker refuses to fight back. Dean wants him to fight back, but eventually realizes that Cass won't. He hates that Cass cares so much about him. He won't hurt Dean back, even at his own detriment, because Dean hates himself so much in that moment. He feels so much rage and hatred. He tries to get Cass to hate him while venting all of this frustration, but it doesn't fucking work. So Dean leaves him bleeding on the floor after almost stabbing Cass with his own damn angel blade. All about this. Okay. So they do manage to get the mark off, but the darkness, aka Amara, aka God's fucking sister, also God is a bisexual deadbeat dad called Chuck, is released onto the world and is now wreaking havoc everywhere she goes. She also has a weird connection with Dean, but it doesn't really matter, to be honest. It doesn't actually affect the story in any big way. When they meet God, which is a wild fucking sentence, Dean is very angry because God sat back and watched as people were abused and raped and killed, and he watched as humans, his creations, committed genocide against each other and tore each other apart on the basis that they were different from each other. I think because of all the things Dean has seen in his life, he thinks that what God has done, ignored people as they died, as people prayed to him for help and followed him implicitly, even killed and allowed people to fucking die in his name, infuriates him that God is so flippant about it. It disgusts him that there are people like him who have devoted their whole lives to protecting what God created, that he was forced to protect these people at such a young age because God couldn't be fucked to try. Also reminds Dean of John, a neglectful, absent parent who let his children slowly tear themselves apart while they followed a father they'd never met to their literal death. Yeah, Dean is totally justified in feeling that way. I certainly fucking would. Like, fuck that guy. So, like I've mentioned before, we've seen throughout the series that when Dean gets desperate, he gets desperate. Even willingly sacrificing himself and allowing other people to sacrifice themselves to a degree, never to the actual point of death. But Cass being possessed by Lucifer is too fucking far for Dean. Dean doesn't care about whether or not they win. He just wants Cass back. Like, he's willing to sacrifice the fucking world if it means getting him Cass back. Even when Sam accepts it and is like, he'll be fine. But Dean still hates it and wants to find a way to make Lucifer fuck off. There's just one scene where Sam refers to Cass as an it and Dean just fucking... I'll try and find the clip on, like, YouTube or something, and I'll put it in here. So yeah, it does kind of seem like Dean is the only one super opposed to this. Everyone else seems to see it greater good. So bottom line, Dean is completely willing to potentially let this primordial entity run around the devil himself if it gets him Cass back. If he cares about someone enough, he will destroy everything in his way and sacrifice everything around him if he can save them. Cass is Dean's personification of faith. Thereby, if Cass dies, Dean loses his faith, and he can't carry on with defeating Amara. Dean also plays what I can only describe as negotiation skills. Immediately resort to violence like he once might have during the final showdown with Amara. The moment she mentions she feels guilt for having her brother and almost killing him, Dean switches from the whole fucking suicide bombing plan to convincing Amara to make up with God, her brother. This shows that Dean now understands communication, even in the most dangerous situations, with the most dangerous outcomes, is often better than violence. This is a massive change from Dean earlier on in the series, where it was shoot first, ask questions later. It just shows the development of his beliefs and a better, more mature understanding of the world he lives in. And it works! Amara and Chuck are chill with each other now, and Dean doesn't fucking die. Mary, Dean's mother, and Sam's, comes back. Now, Mary has been this character who is sort of haunting the narrative, following the characters wherever they go. She's been held up as this, like, perfect paragon of goodness and almost canonized to a degree, turned into a saint in the eyes of the characters, namely Dean and Sam. I will get more into this maybe in another video because I just think it's really interesting, but that's the gist of it. There's this very quickly established dissonance between Mary and Dean, where he still remembers her, but has almost developed this posthumous relationship with her. Helped by John, of course, because what fucking isn't? With her as a saint, an almost Virgin Mary figure, due to this incorrect view of her when she acts human and makes mistakes. It seems strange and unnatural to Dean. It's such a massive change for him. He doesn't know how to interact with her as a person. Mary also doesn't feel like the sons she is interacting with are her actual sons. They're entirely different people to her. And it creates this very strange disconnect between them. Mary also praises John sometimes, and it never really condemns him for his plain-faced abuse and neglect. This creates this, once again, very weird dynamic between Mary and Dean. Neither of them knowing how to interact with each other. Like, it's awkward and unnatural. Dean initially sees her as delicate, even when he knows she was a hunter-father before John, Sam, and Dean ever were. She more than proves herself during these hunts. In spite of this disconnect and dissonance, it's obviously they still care very deeply for each other as the people they are. Okay, so Mary needs space and leaves, which I think really triggers Dean's abandonment issues. It feels like Mary is leaving him again, but this time instead of being like, oh, she fucking died, she didn't have a choice in that, she is choosing to leave. And he thinks that everyone leaves him, and he spirals a bit. He refuses to talk about Mary for any extended period of time while she is gone, and he feels alone, abandoned. He just got his mother back, and she's this person he doesn't know, and then she leaves again. Makes him feel like a child again, like he couldn't save Mary again. Obviously, she's still alive, but I think that's how Dean interpreted the whole situation. Lucifer's possessed the president. Bit of a tone change, I know. Sam and Dean get captured by the feds, because it seems to the outside world they were trying to assassinate the fucking president. One thing I would like to mention about isolation is that it is a form of torture, with Dean saying it's even worse than hell. And this goes on for weeks. I can't remember exactly how long, but I think it was over a month. Isolation on sort of a torturous scale is over 22.5 hours, so this definitely counts. Isolation can cause anxiety, stress, depression, hopelessness, anger, irritability, and hostility. Panic attacks, hypersensitivity to stimuli such as light and sound, problems with attention, concentration, and memory, hallucinations that affect all the senses, paranoia, poor impulse control, social withdrawal, outbursts of violence, fear of death, self-harm, and or suicide. The reason why we're not shown this ever affecting Dean is because Dean has experienced so much trauma, his mind has sort of shut itself off, fully pushing down. He never gets a break from trauma. He never has the opportunities to properly examine it, and therefore his brain naturally buries it. So they get out with help from Billy and meet up with Cass and Mary, who are trying to find them. But now Winchester has to die because they made a deal with Billy. Great. Presumably thought that he was going to be the one to die because he's so fucking self-sacrificial. I think the reason why he does this all the time is going back to only valuing himself by how much he can protect the people he loves, and to Dean, dying protecting the ones he loves is like the most respectable and valuable way for him to go out. Mary almost kills herself, but doesn't, because Cass kills Billy. And cut to the shit that had me bawling my fucking eyes out the first time I saw this episode. Jesus Christ. We are then informed that cosmic consequences will befall Cass. Cool. We really like how that sounds. Dean is incredibly concerned about the cosmic consequences. As I have talked about before, Dean's negative feelings, he's only been taught to show them through anger. And this definitely comes through when Cass makes his decision. Dean seems pissed at him, but in reality, he's scared for Cass because Dean might lose him again. He just got him back. And the only way he knows how to express this is through anger. Okay, so during the episode, Lily Sunder has some regrets. Dean discovers that Castiel was tricked into killing a child under the guise that the child was a Nephilim, which heaven does not allow. By the way, quick PSA, Nephilim, half human, half angel child, incredibly powerful. Okay, even after this, even after finding out that Cass was tricked into killing a literal child, he forgives him. And I think it's because he can empathize being tricked into doing something really fucking awful. And he shows a lot of courage, standing up to Isham, another angel, who tries to kill Cass. Once again, Dean displays that he's moved past the single-minded shoot first, ask questions later, when he proposes to talk to Lily Sunder, instead of just killing her, even in the face of her killing all the angels she can find. And it works a lot better than just fighting all brutality, which is what Isham and Cass proposed. Okay, so Cass nearly dies again. Oh fuck, I just skipped a massive part of the script. Okay, I also find the whole thing regarding Dean where he repeats his own name and then the names of Cass, Sam, and Mary. Like, I think that even when he's losing his memories, he still has this sort of concept in his head that he is not made by his bad decisions, but by the people he surrounds himself with. Like, the people he surrounds himself with, Cass, Sam, and Mary, they're his tether to his own goodness and humanity and he's done and been through. Anyway, Cass nearly fucking dies again. Don't worry, he gets better. I think during this whole thing, Dean kind of freezes up as he watches his best friend. The situation, until Crowley rocks up, is basically hopeless. Like, Cass is slowly dying in a horrific and painful way, and Dean has for his whole life been able to protect the people he helped, or been able to, in some way, even if they still end up hurt or dead. But in this fucking barn, he can't. He watches Cass die in a barn the same way he met, but terrified for different reasons. Dean even feels grateful towards Crowley, someone who's been a reluctant ally and a straight-up enemy who tried to kill Dean multiple times over. Dean doesn't forgive Crowley for his wrongs, but is still able to be grateful for saving Cass, and this definitely shows how much he's progressed. And now he can understand that you can still remember the things that someone did to you, but be grateful for helping, be grateful for them helping you. Oh, also Mary's part of the British men of letters now, who are pretentious assholes and tortured Sam, which is certainly a decision. This obviously did not go down well and went down like a fucking bomb and left a massive radiation site that continued to poison everyone, and it fucking sucks. During this, Mary begins trying to bring Sam and Dean into British men of letters. Sam and Dean refuse, obviously, and even begin distrusting Mary, especially Dean, who now understands that this illusion of a perfect mother, perfect wife, the modern day Virgin Mary, this paragon of femininity and traditionalism is not true. She is her own person, and therefore she can be tricked, she can be lied to, she can be drawn into organizations and groups that only want to exploit her. Dean knows this. Dean knows that Mary doesn't understand what the British men of letters are like. Oh, like Samuel and the Campbells before her. Dean overrides this family is everything belief, which he seems to have mostly done away with by now, at least with blood family, in order to protect the people he cares about. Even when it's proved that the British men of letters don't know hands-on hunting, Mary still follows them, and so Dean pulls further away in order to protect himself and his family. Dean still helps other hunters like Claire. I think he sees as a younger sister or like a daughter figure, or at least someone who he needs to help and protect when she needs it. Dean even goes as far as using an entirely experimental cure supplied by the British men of letters that could kill her when she's bitten by a werewolf, because he cannot fucking deal with losing her, even when she is begging Dean to kill her. I think Dean sees a lot of himself in her, like a young child without their parents, hunting monsters around the world, feeling abandoned by everyone around them, but eventually carving out their own family and finding their own little place, and is influenced by Castiel's relationship with Claire as well. He wants to see her grow and flourish, and knows that Cass wants the same, and he can see how distraught they would both be if she died. Like, Dean sees himself in Claire, so therefore tries to treat her the way that he wanted to be treated as a child, trying to give her what he never had. He doesn't want to continue the cycle of abuse. Also, Dean's relationship with Jodie and Donna probably massively impacted this choice, as the two women basically became Claire's adoptive mothers and helped her grow in this world full of monsters. I don't want to see all these people around him hurt and hurting for the rest of their lives of something he perceives as a failure on his part. Lucifer has a son, who a woman named Kelly Klein is pregnant with. Cass starts to help her after the child shows him the paradise it wants to create. In the finale, Lucifer kills Cass and pulls Mary into another reality. Jack is born, Kelly is dead, Cass is dead, Mary's in an entire other world with Lucifer. As we get to the beginning of season 13 and the beginning of season 15, it's just really sad. By this point, Dean is just tired and sad to the point where he's completely losing the things about himself that he prided and loved the most. Like the first time we see this in season 2, as I mentioned earlier on, he told Sam he was tired of living but kept going to protect Sam and save people because he still believed he could. But once Jack is introduced and everyone is living in the bunker, it's like he's using the finite reserves of all of these qualities that he used to have in abundance to give. He used up, and he's broken, and he's tired. He's fucking tired as shit. Looking after them, like cooking meals for them, but then locking himself in his room and isolating himself. He's worried and protective over everyone, but he's chewing off their heads at a moment's notice. He even threatens Jack, who sees Dean as one of his parents. It's like the writers went down this route where they made Dean so bitter and grizzled, and Jack never got to experience what Dean used to have to offer, the parental side, to the full extent. Like, it just sucks. His whole life he was so focused on becoming like his father, he became his mother, Mary, instead. So worn out that he ends up distant, dissociative. Most of the interactions he has with Cass, Jack, or Sam are out of necessity, or Dean trying to push them further away, arguing with them about anything and everything. I think this is massively influenced by Cass's death in the beginning of season 13. Dean says that he's lost his faith. Cass is Dean's faith. Like, the person, angel, fucking whatever, he believes in and trusts the most in his life. And when Cass dies, Dean loses that. He loses the will to live and carry on with life because he has lost his metaphorical faith. Yes, Dean can save him. Person that spurred him on to keep living and to be good. And Dean sees that as a complete failure, that he couldn't even save the person he cared about so much. I think Dean feels very guilty for the fact that Castiel betrayed heaven, fell for him, was hunted and hated by all of his siblings, died multiple times for Dean, only to end up dead outside of an unfamiliar cabin, killed by Lucifer. And contrived by Chuck for his own entertainment. Like, he becomes very practical and pushes down all these emotions. Though it is shown that pretty much every free moment, this is all Dean can think about. He thinks that he has never been in control. He has never even made his own decision, and that he doesn't have free will, and never has. Dean is also really apathetic towards Cass. Like, he seemingly blames him somewhat. The absolute shit show they're in. He's harsh and uncaring, and it really sucks to watch. You can see where he's coming from in this situation, but it is heartbreaking and I don't like it. Then Cass and Dean have this conversation, which is just so many levels of heartbreak. Dean still blames him for Mary's death, which is probably amplified by the many conflicting feelings around Jack's death, manipulation of their lives by Chuck. And in response to this, Cass says that they were real, which supernatural writers try not to make everything sound romantic as fuck challenge. Cass tries to convince Dean that just because Chuck had control, that doesn't mean by any stretch that everything was contrived by him. Their bond was real. They were real. Like I said, supernatural writers try not to make everything sound romantic as fuck challenge, level impossible. But anyway, managed to help the town and get rid of all the fucking ghosts. Two of which actually are serial killers, real life serial killers. Okay, so this is a really random side tangent, but John Wayne Gacy, who was a notorious, which I feel like everyone's heard of him by now, but if you don't know, notorious serial killer, rapist, pedophile, disgusting. He's also known as the Killer Clown because his job on the side was a clown for children's birthday parties, which, Also, a guy called Francis Tumblr, who was a suspect for Jack the Ripper. So, at least in the universe of Supernatural, Francis Tumblr was Jack the Ripper. But anyway, so they managed to help the town by getting rid of all of the ghosts and by sending Cass and Belphegor into the massive rift in the ground that leads to hell so they can get all the ghosts back with this fucking horn. But Belphegor had alternative motives to take control of hell as the throne is free. So this doesn't go well at all. Cass kills him, which is an absolute mindfuck because he is still wearing Jack's fucking skin. And the spell Rowena originally wanted to do doesn't work, so she does a different one where she has to be killed. Sam kills her, and then she jumps into the rift and closes it. Luckily, Cass gets out in time, but Dean blames him for Rowena's death, despite knowing about Belphegor's ulterior motives. And Dean just blows up at him and blames him for all of this. So Cass decides to leave because he doesn't feel needed anymore and believes that he is just a burden. So Dean pushes Cass away because Cass is someone who can see right fucking through him, who knows Dean well enough to know that he isn't okay. Cass, as I mentioned, is also Dean's scapegoat for Mary and now Rowena's deaths. At this point, I think Dean is so overcome by all of the events that have happened. I don't think he can actually consider how Cass feels about all of this. He can't deal with that, so he pushes Cass away and makes him leave. Cass does come back eventually, but there's definitely still a lot of tension. Dean is clearly guilty over what he said to Cass, but finds apologising so fucking difficult because he thinks that Cass won't accept it, that this time he went too far, and he doesn't want to have the fear of Cass abandoning him confirmed. We find out Michael and Adam are back. Michael's still possessing Adam, but allowing him control. This is probably one of the, fucking healthiest relationships in this whole series. Let that sink in for a hot minute. But anyway, Dean and Sam apologise to Adam about leaving him in the cage with Lucifer. Adam doesn't completely forgive them, which I personally think he has more than right to do. Decides to help them anyway, eventually convincing Michael to do so. So Michael gives them the spell to trap Chuck in the way Amara trapped through a Mark Kane kind of deal. They need a Leviathan Blossom for the spell, which is in fucking Purgatory. We are back in Purgatory. Okay. So Cass and Dean go into Purgatory where the bickering continues. They clearly still haven't forgiven each other for their respective grudges against each other. Eventually, they find a Leviathan and force it to lead them to the Leviathan Blossoms, where it is revealed that Benny was killed by other vampires, most likely for teaming up with Dean. And Dean is clearly very struck by this and incredibly guilty, as he is the one who sent Benny back. Yeah, guilty conscience, once again, go to therapy. But then Cass is captured by Leviathans, which is not good. I don't know if you'll remember the whole fucking eating souls thing. So, sorry if I'm moving around a bit, I'm trying to sit down. This is gays can't sit, basically. But anyway, when Dean realises this, that Cass has been captured, I think he has this terrifying epiphany that Cass might be dead, and that he might have died genuinely believing that Dean never forgave him, and that Dean didn't care about him. When Dean realises this, it hits him that if Cass was dead, they would never get the chance to apologise or repair their relationship. And this hits Dean, and it clearly fucking terrifies him that now not only has he lost Mary, Rowena, and Jack, he might lose Cass too. And that is just unacceptable. Dean prays to Cass, and there is so much going on here. He apologises to Cass for everything, and he acknowledges how his own anger has ruined his relationship with Cass, and will continue to destroy his life and others around him if he doesn't apologise and work through that. I think this is one of the very first times seeing Dean be so openly vulnerable, doing it so willingly because he is so scared. His fear of loss and abandonment and his acknowledgement and apologies overrides this bullshit expectation of him to be strong all the time and to not show emotion other than through anger. He realizes that this expectation was not only wrong and toxic, but is morphed into something that is ruining his life. And in his prayer, I think he's the most vulnerable we've ever seen him just on the show, especially willingly. It's actually quite amazing, and I certainly haven't covered all of it, but that's just what I think about Dean in context of analysing Dean. Okay, they perform the spell, which turns into this glass ball looking thing, and they have to smash it, and Cass will take the mark. Find Sam and Eileen, who are currently with Chuck. Chuck is trying to dig the bullet out of Sam's shoulder. From when Sam shot Chuck with the special gun, gave them to kill Jack. He does this by forcing Eileen to dig the bullet out with a fucking scalpel. Actual mind control. So Chuck showed Sam visions of the future, which leads to Sam refusing to glass and ball, therefore preventing Cass from taking the mark. Chuck destroys the spell, Sam loses hope, and both their bullet wounds heal almost immediately. I think Dean realizes that Chuck doesn't actually have complete control over them, or he planned out parts of their lives, but Chuck clearly didn't control the plans to take him down. Chuck didn't plan for Team Free Will 2.0 to try to destroy him. Like, Chuck didn't want them to get this far, and if he'd wanted to, he could have prevented this shit easily if he was all powerful. Dean realizes this and knows that he does have control. Life is his life, and no one can take that from him. So Jack comes back with news from Billy, who is using him as a weapon against Chuck by powering him up until he can defeat Chuck. Dean still seems to care for Jack in spite of Mary's death, worrying about Billy's plan and whether it will hurt Jack. Find out that the plan does involve Jack becoming a literal bomb and he will die. Dean still decides to go ahead with the plan. I think this is due to the fact that he sees how close they are to defeating Chuck. Only becomes incredibly desperate but becoming desperate to the point he does not care about who gets hurt as long as Chuck no longer has control and they can have true free will. Jack gets his soul back. Dean still feels protective over Jack though, and this is especially shown through the episode The Last Holiday, where a wood nymph who once protected the Men of Letters attempts to kill Jack due to him being a quote-unquote monster. Dean is vehemently against this, even willing to kill the wood nymph if it means Jack is left alive. This doesn't have to happen, and they make the wood nymph realise that the Men of Letters were only controlling her and that Jack isn't a monster. It's even shown that Dean celebrates Jack's birthday with him and participates in family-oriented holidays such as Christmas together. Dean even makes the fucking birthday cake for Jack, and it's really cute. Boy, daddy issues. But I think he does see Jack as his kid to a degree, treating him how he would have liked to be treated as a kid. They find Amara, who they ask to help defeat Chuck. It's also shown that Dean now resents Amara due to her role in bringing Mary back, telling her that she is just like her brother Chuck, and she is trapped in a story just like the rest of them. I think Dean believes that Amara should have never brought Mary back in the first place, that even though it was great to have his mother back, Amara should have never made that decision. Mary was thrown into a world she didn't understand, where she had been mythologized to her own family. Amara wanted Dean to see she was a person, but that wasn't a justification for bringing back a woman who had been dead for a long time. Dean also lies to Amara, promising that he won't hurt her if she participates in this plan. This also shows that Amara no longer has any hold over Dean, even though it seems that Amara herself doesn't realize this. Like, Dean is willing to hurt her in order to save his family, and he knows that Amara still thinks they have a special bond. It's actually quite smart, but okay. In the episode Drag Me Away, we are taken back to Dean and Sam's childhood, where they were dropped in a motel by John that was haunted by the Baba Yaga. Baba Yaga is a monster from Slavic folklore that eats children. Okay, so the Baba Yaga is a monster from Slavic folklore that eats children. In folklore, it is either depicted as a repulsive-looking woman or a nice old lady that leads children into the forest where it then consumes them. In Supernatural, it can shapeshift at will and uses this to either scare its prey or lure them. It does still eat kids, though. So Sam and Dean encountered this when they were kids and John was out on a hunt. They thought they killed it, but this wasn't the case, and they come back to the motel. We see a lot of flashbacks of Sam and Dean and their friends Travis and Caitlin. So Travis, Caitlin, Sam, Dean... Sam, Dean and Caitlin go back to investigate the motel in modern day. Travis presumably killed himself after going back to the motel. So the Baba Yaga often appears to the three as their younger selves, but with more of a corpse-like appearance. There's a specific flashback where Dean sees the bodies of children that the Baba Yaga were feasting on, which he refuses to allow Sam, Caitlin, and Travis to see. Even as a child, Dean felt as if he had to shoulder this burden alone and never drop this tough guy facade. Even at a young age, this has been hammered into his head to the point where it becomes him. I think the Baba Yaga represents trauma and how it haunts these three, formerly four, throughout their lives, but none of them ever being able to truly shake the experience. Like the Baba Yaga, it never truly leaves. always lurking in the corners of your mind until you least expect it. Trauma eats you alive, slowly killing you, like the Baba Yaga. I think the death of the Baba Yaga represents Dean, Sam, and Caitlin accepting that this thing did happen to them and it was awful. It changed them for the rest of their lives. But if they keep holding on to it, it will kill them. Trevor represents this. Oh my god, why did I call him Trevor? Travis represents this, having held on to the Baba Yaga's ring his whole life, as it feels like if he doesn't, he loses all sense of self. When Dean, Sam, and Caitlin let go of this and finally destroy the ring, they let go of this trauma in order to live. They understand that they are more than this one experience, and that they can lead lives where they don't have to hold on to this. Oh boy, okay, we're at this bit. Dean explicitly says to Sam that Jack isn't family in order to convince him that it's okay to sacrifice Jack in order to kill God. I'm just thinking, like, anyone who just wanted to watch an analysis and stopped at, like, season 6 or 7 is listening to this and me just dropping in random plot points. I can't imagine how those people feel. Like, this is not where you thought this show was going. Anyway, so Dean's opinion on Jack seems to change wildly depending on the situation. Like, Dean obviously cares deeply for Jack at some points, but then only a few episodes later he's telling Sam that he's going to sacrifice Jack and that Jack isn't family. This picture's gonna give me fucking whiplash. I think Dean does this because when Jack is needed for these sort of fucking suicide missions, Dean forces himself to slip back original opinion of Jack as inherently bad and not someone they should care about. It's easier to do this because Dean can convince himself that he doesn't care about Jack and that Jack somehow deserves this for the crime of just living, therefore making it easier to sacrifice Jack in the pursuit of his revenge against Chuck when he really does care about him. But if he admitted himself and allowed himself to feel that care for Jack, it would be so much harder, maybe even impossible, to allow Jack to do this. Dean decides to go ahead with the plan, turn Jack into a bomb. When they find the Rib of Adam, which will set off the chain reaction, it will effectively turn into a bomb. When they find the Rib of Adam, which will set off the chain reaction, it will effectively turn him into a celestial nuclear bomb. So on the way there, Jack says that he understands why he has to die and that he's not like Sam or Cass. He completely accepts his fate due to the fact that he sees himself as a weapon and that Jack thinks at this point that he deserves this. I think this really hits Dean that this child believes he should die. A large part of this due to Dean having treated him as something inherently bad as a lot of the time, even before Mary's death. I think Dean realizes his wrongs in this moment and doesn't think that Jack actually deserves to die in this way. That Jack deserves forgiveness before he dies. Dean realizes that he does, in fact, care about Jack. On the way to the bunker, Dean pulls over and tells Jack he didn't deserve to hear that. Jack is about to sacrifice himself so Dean, Sam, and Cass can lead lives unencumbered by apocalypses and Chuck. Maybe even lead somewhat normal lives without the looming fear of monsters. Jack realizes, and Dean realizes, Jack is doing this because he genuinely cares about them and sees them as his family and wants to see them be happy, even when Dean doesn't see Jack as family. And Dean realizes that Jack is good and that he deserves forgiveness and thanks him for the sacrifice. I think that when he realizes what he is about to let Jack do, does feel regret. And it does seem like Dean finally forgives him. And then they go back to the bunker where Jack eats Adam's rib, thereby setting off the chain reaction. And by eat the rib, I mean it's a rib in a little plastic baggie that, Adam himself carved out of his own body, and Jack just eats the whole thing. So, Amara and Chuck have been trapped in the bunker. Sam and Cass have found a way to potentially defeat Chuck, which was in Billy's books, and Sam comes back with the God Death book, which, as it says in the name, Shows how God will die. So it turns out Billy was manipulating them the whole time because she wanted to be God. So Sam tries to explain this to Dean, in turn ensuring Jack won't have to die. Dean pulls a fucking gun on him and tells Cass and Sam that Jack has already kickstarted the reaction that turns him into a celestial nuclear bomb. Dean and Sam start to fight, during which Dean says that he will sacrifice everything to stop Chuck. At this point, Dean is fucking desperate because there have been so many times where they get close to killing Chuck, and they're somehow stopped. Something goes wrong. Now they have an almost foolproof plan to kill Chuck. Dean is almost manic with how close they are, using to listen to anyone in the way. He doesn't want to lose again because he believes that this is their last chance or they are all fucked. Dean is desperate and he isn't thinking straight. Memories of his failures come back to him and he can't let Chuck win. He can't let Chuck have control anymore. I also think the reason why Dean wants to defeat Chuck so badly is because he has been controlled by his whole life. First it was John, his own father, and it was so many others, heaven, the angels, and finally God, and he just wants to be free. But eventually, Sam manages to get through to Dean. Dean puts the gun down and Chuck bursts through the door. Chuck absorbed? Amara. That's the best way I can describe it. He goes on this tirade, the first half of which reveals that Cass is the only one who disobeyed in every universe. But these other universe Casses followed the orders he was given. But in this one, Cass didn't. There was only one fucking universe! Sorry about that. He calls Cass broken, parrots a bunch of shit others have said to him, basically resorting to exploiting Cass's insecurities because he is losing. Then Chuck says that they are all broken toys, and that he hopes they have fun watching Jack die. And then he leaves. I think when oh my fucking god! I think when Dean realizes that Chuck has set this whole thing up, Dean has realizes how far he has gone, once again manipulated by Chuck into doing this. So as an act of defiance, he completely changes tune, refusing to give up on Jack and deciding to go along with the plan, not contrived by anyone other than him and his family. This act of defiance is compounded by his guilt for almost killing Jack, when that was what Chuck wanted all along. Chuck had been pitting them against each other so they would all tear each other apart instead of focusing on defeating him. And Dean understands this. He knows they all have to do this together, otherwise they're gonna have no chance. Family is everything, not in the way Dean once thought. You can choose your family and you can grow with them, become stronger with them, and even defeat God with them. Despair. Yeah, we're gonna talk about this one. Jack begins to detonate, and Billy rocks up and teleports him to the empty, where he can detonate safely. Safe-ish. He could still die. People start disintegrating and disappearing, including Eileen's death seems to push everyone into concocting a plan, with Jack and Sam going to round up all of the potential targets from Billy. Dean and Cass go to finish Billy off. They go back to the bar where they have the key to Death's library, so they decide to ruin the place in order to smoke Billy out. I think when Dean sees Eileen die, he realizes that they can't let up. They can't let others die. He can't let Eileen's death have been for nothing. So Dean and Cass run back to the bunker, where Billy tries to stop Dean's heart. Cass brings him into a room and closes the door. There's a little bit of warding, but not nearly enough to keep an entity such as Billy out. And then Cass decides to summon the empty to Earth via a deal he made whilst trying to save Jack, where he agreed in exchange for Jack's life, the empty would come and take him at his happiest moment. The empty is the only being that Billy is scared of, so Cass tells Dean that he loves him, which is his happiest moment, thereby killing himself and in order to save Dean. Jesus fucking Christ. Okay, there's so much going on here, and I'm going to try and process all of this and articulate in a way that makes sense. Most of the conversation around this episode in specific, what I have said has been leading up to this, And yes, this is going to kind of turn into a Destiel analysis, which I refuse to apologize for. Like, you cannot look me dead in the eyes and tell me that you didn't expect me to be a Hella. But, okay, I want to talk about the very beginning of this scene, where Dean says that Billy is going to kill Cass and then Dean. I think this is very interesting for multiple reasons. Dean is obviously terrified since the situation is basically hopeless. They're trapped in the bunker with Death Incarnate, who is hell-bent on killing the two of them as her last act. Dean knows that Cass will die protecting, because Cass will never stop protecting him. He has become Dean's most trusted friend and closest ally and would do anything for him. Cass has died for Dean before and is more than willing to do so again, which terrifies Dean. He can't protect Cass in this situation, thing that he values most in himself. Alongside this, if Billy gets her way, she wants to kill Cass in front of Dean in order to cause him as much pain as possible before his death. She knows how much Cass means to Dean. She wants to torture him using this. She wants to use his love and care, which are two things that he prides himself in the most, against him in one last violent act. And Dean is terrified. He's terrified that the one thing that has driven him his whole life, protecting the people he loves, is going to be ripped away just before he is killed and used against him. He knows they are fucked and he can no longer protect Cass. He can no longer protect the people he loves. He can no longer sacrifice himself because she will kill them both, even in her not so desired order. Doesn't matter, they are both going to die and there is nothing that Dean can do about it. This is the most helpless I think he's felt, maybe even ever. Like, his main motive ripped away from him in the moments before his death. Then the fucking monologue. Jesus Christ. Okay, I would like to mention this scene is edited very strangely, and it's commonly accepted that there was probably a lot cut out of this scene. But of course, this is the scene we got, and therefore the one I will analyse. 5th of November 2020, baby, where everyone got activated like fucking sleeper agents on Tumblr. So, when Cass starts, Dean is obviously surprised and scared of what is happening. Dean is still listening and very much trying to take in what Cass is saying. And when Cass finishes this, Dean says, "Don't do this, Cass," which I find very, very interesting. I think Dean knew what Cass was going to say, and therefore the consequences of... I think he did reciprocate, but was just in shock. Like, he's obviously not disgusted, or has that face people make when they're like, sorry, I don't feel the same way. Hope you know the one. Wait, no. Actually, I don't, getting rejected sucks. I'm sorry if that's happened to you, no. Just looks destroyed. Cass obviously says that he loves him, and then pushes him out of the way of the MT, which leads a fucking bloody handprint on the same shoulder Dean's handprint scar was on. I am trying to calm myself down, but it's becoming increasing. Billy then breaks through and is taken alongside Cass. I want to die. At this point, Dean is just in shock. Sam tries to ring him, but he ignores the call and just breaks down. I'm fine. So Dean just watched one of the people he loves most in the world die after telling them that they love him. And not just anyone. Cass, the angel who did everything for Dean. He has died at the very end of the world before he could see what the world and their lives could be like without Chuck. Dean sits there and cries and ignores his brother's phone call, who he would usually do anything for. He is absolutely emotionally destroyed. The world has already ended. Cass is gone, having died. This time for good. Dean, the world is already over. Chuck shows up when Dean and Sam are driving on a desolate road. They attempt to make a deal with him where they'll kill each other for Chuck's story. In exchange, Chuck puts everything back the way it was, including Cass. Once again, Dean is completely willing to die if it warrants others coming back. He wants the people he loves so much back. He doesn't care if he's alive to see them or not. The only important thing is whether his family survives. In the final showdown with Chuck, Chuck kills Michael and beats the shit out of Sam and Dean, telling them to give up. This scene where Sam and Dean refuse to give up, even in the face of God, shows how they are just completely unwilling to give up, knowing that in the end they'll win no matter what. It's to show Chuck that he doesn't have total control. They will keep fighting against him, even past death, even past total destruction. They refuse to give up, in spite of all that's happened. Doesn't matter, because they have to keep fighting. If they don't, then what else do they have? Chuck doesn't have complete control over Sam and Dean. They have free will, and this is their final act of defiance against Chuck. Show him that he doesn't matter as much as he thinks he does. Chuck is now defeated, and then the CW just never aired the finale. They just left it at that, and no one knows why. It just never happened. I'm kidding, obviously, but I'm not going to talk about the finale because it completely forgoes any kind of character development Dean had, and it all around sucked ass. So this is my Dean Winchester analysis. Sorry if this wasn't great. This is the first character analysis I've ever done. I just tried to lay down the foundations of Dean in the beginning and then go through the rest of the show, analysing his actions. Anyway, I hope you did enjoy it, and thank you so much for your time. It really means a lot to me. This is my first ever YouTube video. Also, I'm gonna put a couple of links to other videos, specifically Bob Wes's analysis of Dean as bisexual. I can't actually remember the title, but I'll link it down below, and I'll link a couple of others that I find really interesting, just if you want to look more into this topic. Also, sorry if this was a bit long. This is my first ever YouTube video. I'm probably going to do more character analyses in the future. I'm going to try and do a couple more on Supernatural because I really like analysing this show and the themes within it. But anyway, thank you so fucking much for your time. I hope you enjoyed. Bye!